You died. That part barely left a mark. What came after is the part you remember. Hueco Mundo, the white desert under a moon that never sets, where dead souls eat each other until something stronger notices. You ate, you grew. You lost the face you had when you were alive and gained a mask made of bone and hunger. And then, one day, a calm man with brown hair and glasses walked out of a tear in the sky and made you an offer. A uniform, a palace, a number. Sosuke Aizen built his army the way a company builds a leadership team. He found the 10 strongest Arrancar in the desert, stripped their masks, gave each one a rank tattooed somewhere on their body, and assigned them an aspect of death. Not a title, a diagnosis. Your aspect tells the universe what kind of dying you represent. Your number tells everyone in the room how much you matter. You're starting at 9. Rank 9. You are Aaroniero, Arruruerie, and your head is a glass capsule filled with liquid and 2 floating skulls that take turns speaking. Your power is consumption. You ate a hollow called Metastasia, who had previously eaten a Soul Reaper lieutenant named Kaien Shiba, and now you carry his face, his Zanpakuto, and his muscle memory. You can look like him, fight like him, speak like him. You are the only Gillian-class hollow to make the Espada. Everyone above you clawed their way to a higher evolution. You took a shortcut through someone else's corpse. Your aspect is greed, and it shows. You fight Rukia Kuchiki in the dark corridors under Las Noches, and you wear the face of a man she cared about. She freezes. You press the opening. Then sunlight hits the room, the illusion cracks, and she drives her Zanpakuto through you. The stolen face melts away. Greed only works in the dark, and you ran out of shadows. Rank 8. Szayelaporro Granz. Your aspect is madness, and your combat philosophy is premeditation taken to a clinical extreme. You prepared for your enemies months before they arrived by planting surveillance bacteria that mapped their spiritual pressure, cataloged their techniques, and fed the data back to your lab. Your resurrección, fornicarás, turns your body into something between a moth and a cathedral organ, and your signature technique, Gabriel, lets you create a voodoo doll of your opponent's internal organs. Pinch the doll's liver, their liver ruptures. Crush the doll's heart, they stop breathing. Surgery without the consent form. You fight Mayuri Kurotsuchi, Soul Society's resident mad scientist, and the match looks like a peer review session between 2 people who consider ethics a suggestion. Mayuri beats you by injecting a drug that stretches your perception of time. 1 second becomes a century. A blade enters your chest at what feels like the speed of continental drift. You die fully conscious, fully aware, for longer than most empires lasted. Mayuri watches, takes notes, and calls you unremarkable. Your madness was methodical, his was casual. That's the difference. Rank 7. Zommari Rureaux. Your aspect is intoxication, and your speed is the fastest sonido in the Espada. Your resurrección, brujería, gives you 50 eyes distributed across your body, and each eye can take sovereign control of anything it locks onto. A limb, a weapon, a person. You fight Byakuya Kuchiki and nearly win by seizing control of Rukia's body, turning her into a puppet aimed at her own brother. Byakuya responds by severing the tendons in her legs so she physically can't walk toward him, then closes the distance to you. You die mid-speech about Arrancar supremacy and the injustice of Soul Reaper arrogance. Byakuya doesn't engage with the argument. He rarely wastes words on someone who's already finished. Rank 6. Now it gets personal. You are Grimmjow Jaegerjaquez, and your aspect of death is destruction, which is less of a descriptor and more of a lifestyle. Before Aizen found you, you were an Jaegerjaquez-class Menos running a pack in the desert. Your followers knew they were regressing, losing their evolved forms, sliding back toward the mindless Gillian mass. They asked you to eat parts of them. Not out of defeat, out of logic. If they couldn't keep evolving, at least they'd continue to exist inside someone who could. You ate them. You didn't hesitate, and you didn't forget their faces. Aizen gave you the number 6, and that number sat in your chest like a bone splinter. 6th. You lived for combat, and you were ranked behind 4 people who barely seemed to care. You launched an unauthorized raid on the living world. Kaname Tosen cut off your arm as punishment. Aizen approved. Later, Orihime Inoue restored the arm because Aizen needed you functional for the war, and you went straight back to the one thing you actually wanted: Ichigo Kurosaki. Not because he threatened the plan, because he fought like someone still figuring out his ceiling, and you needed to be the one standing there when he found it. Your Resurrección, Panthera, turned you into an armored feline predator, faster, sharper, stripped of anything resembling patience. You got your fight at full power, lost it, and walked away alive, which for an Espada is practically a retirement package. Destruction was your aspect, but survival was your talent. The rematch was still on the table, and that was enough. Rank 5. Nnoitra Gilga, tallest Espada, thinnest, the one with the worst attitude in a building full of dead people with bad attitudes. Your aspect is despair, and you weaponized it by making sure everyone around you felt it before you did. Your Hiero was the hardest of any Espada. Blades bounced off your skin like they'd hit a wall. You wanted to die in battle, because that was the only death worth having, and nobody could deliver it. The frustration made you cruel. The cruelty made you harder to kill. The cycle fed itself. You ambushed Neliel II Odelschwank when she ranked 3rd, attacked from behind, cracked her mask, and dumped a former Espada into the desert as a child with no memory. She came back during the war, briefly, and nearly beat you again before her power burned out. Then, Kenpachi Zaraki arrived. He cut through your Hiero on the second swing, and you felt the blade go through, and you smiled. Despair was always about reaching for something that stayed out of range. In your case, it was a death that mattered. Zaraki gave you one. You accepted it with the closest thing to peace you ever managed. Rank 4. Ulquiorra Cifer. Your aspect is emptiness, and you wore it like a uniform underneath the uniform. Aizen trusted you more than any other Espada because you never added interpretation to a report. When he needed intelligence, you removed your own eye, crushed it, and replayed the stored memory for the room. Surveillance as self-mutilation. You delivered facts. Feelings were a gap in your data. You were assigned to guard Orihime Inoue in Las Noches, and you spent the entire arc asking her about the heart, what it was, where it was located, whether it was something you could see if you cut open a human chest. She told you it was between people. You filed that under inconclusive. You had a second Resurrección, Murcielago Segunda Etapa. No other Espada reached this stage. Aizen never saw it. In that form, you grew massive black bat wings, a whip-like tail, and a lance of compressed spiritual energy called Lanza del Relampago that detonated craters into the dome of Las Noches. You fought Ichigo above the dome and killed him. His inner hollow took over the body, and the thing that came back was not Ichigo. You asked it whether it was afraid. You wanted to know, genuinely. It was the first question you ever asked that wasn't tactical. You lost. Your body began crumbling to ash from the wings inward. In your last seconds, you reached toward Orihime. Not a strike, not a threat. A reach. The fandom has argued for 15 years about whether that was curiosity or emotion, and the answer matters because it determines whether emptiness was your nature or your condition. You faded before you found out. The hand turned to dust 6 inches short. Rank 3, Tier Harribel. Your aspect is sacrifice, and unlike most Espada who wore their aspects like armor, you actually lived yours. Before Aizen recruited you, you gathered female Arrancar who were being hunted by stronger hollows in the desert. You protected them, built something resembling a community in a world that runs entirely on consumption. Your Resurrección channeled water in a dimension made of sand and bone, which is either poetic or impractical depending on your priorities. During the war in the fake Karakura town, you fought Captain Commander Yamamoto's former student and held the line. Then Aizen cut you down from behind, his own soldier. He said you were too weak to fight for him, which was corporate restructuring dressed up as a battlefield decision. Your loyalty was your defining quality, and your loyalty was the thing that kept you standing still long enough to be betrayed. Sacrifice, as an aspect, has a built-in design flaw. You give, and the person you give to gets to decide what it was worth. You survived, though. After the war, with Aizen sealed, you became the de facto ruler of Hueco Mundo. The throne was empty, and you were still standing. Not the career path you planned, but the one you got. Rank 2, Baraggan Louisenbairn. Your aspect is aging, and you were the king of Hueco Mundo before Aizen was even a concept. You sat on a throne of bone in an empty palace under an empty sky and ruled over a kingdom of hollows who obeyed you because everything near you decayed. Not metaphorically, physically. Your spiritual pressure accelerated time around your body. Stone crumbled, flesh withered, steel rusted to dust. You had been sitting on that throne for longer than most civilizations in the living world had existed, and your only complaint was boredom. Then Aizen walked into your throne room, dismantled your guards without moving, showed you that your kingdom was sand and your subjects were animals, and offered you a number. 2. Second place. You had been a king for millennia, and now you were a vice president in someone else's startup. You accepted because you didn't have a choice, and you never, not once, let go of the grudge. Your resurrección arrogante turned you into a crowned skeleton in royal robes, and your respira ability rotted everything it touched. Flesh, bone, keto barriers, the concept of durability itself. During the war, Suifeng hit you with a missile designed to kill anything in one shot, and you walked out of the blast radius annoyed. Hachigen Ushoda beat you by teleporting a keto barrier already corroding with your own respira inside your body. The King of Decay was consumed by his own power, eaten from the inside. Your last act was throwing your axe at Aizen. It dissolved before it touched him. Even your final grudge had an expiration date. Rank 1, Coyote Starrk. Your aspect is loneliness, and you didn't earn it. You were born into it. Your spiritual pressure was so dense that other hollows died simply by standing near you. Not a fight, not an attack. They just stopped existing because your proximity was more than their bodies could process. You didn't want power, you wanted company, and the universe gave you the opposite. So you split your own soul in two, tore yourself apart, and created Lilynette Gingerbuck, a small, loud, argumentative girl who was literally the other half of your being. She wasn't your subordinate. She wasn't your fraction in any meaningful sense. She was the companion you ripped out of your own existence because being alone was worse than being weaker. When Aizen found you in the desert, he didn't offer you power. He offered you proximity to people who could survive being near you. That was enough. Not ambition, not revenge, not ideology, just the chance to have colleagues who wouldn't dissolve. During the war, you fought Shunsui Kyoraku, one of the oldest captains in Soul Society, and the fight had the energy of two people who would genuinely rather be doing anything else. Lilynette was absorbed into your weapons during the battle. She didn't die in a way you could see. She just stopped being separate. You were alone again, mid-fight, with no one to argue with and no reason to keep the rhythm going. Shunsui's Zanpakuto ability forced a children's game onto the battlefield. Color-based rules, tag mechanics. It killed you in a move that looked almost casual. You fell, and on the way down, you wondered whether Aizen had ever considered any of you friends. You knew the answer before you hit the ground. You'd always known. And there's technically a rank 0, Yammy Ljargo, aspect of rage. His tattoo read 10 until he released, then the 1 dissolved and left the 0. He grew large enough to require a separate zip code, strongest Espada by raw reiatsu and the least compelling by every other measure. Byakuya and Kenpachi handled him together, and the manga didn't bother showing most of the fight. When your entire character arc can be summarized as got bigger and angrier, the narrative moves on without you. Rage, as it turns out, is the loudest aspect and the emptiest. 10 numbers, 10 aspects of death. 10 Arrancar recruited from a desert by a man who viewed them as staffing decisions. Aizen gave them a palace with white walls and no windows, a uniform they all wore the same way, and the illusion that the number on their body meant belonging instead of inventory. He cataloged them like assets on a balance sheet, praised them exactly enough to maintain productivity, and canceled them the moment the margin didn't justify the cost. And that's the Espada career ladder, ranked, reviewed, and terminated by a man who never once used the word colleague. Just tools, depreciating ones, with an aspect of death where the severance package should have been.